We'll get started. Firstly, thanks so much for joining us and giving up your lunchtime to come along and talk about setting up a Sanctuary Scholarship. Just so you know, this workshop is geared at university staff. So we are mainly going to be talking about the kind of practicalities and logistics of setting up a scholarship for students from forced migrant backgrounds at your institution. If you aren't a member of staff at a university and you're just interested, that's absolutely fine, but you might find that some of this isn't relevant to you. I'd also just want to emphasize we have an hour today. It's going to be a very brief introduction to what can be a complex topic. So we're going to kind of share some of the key principles that you might need to think about, but don't worry if you don't feel you've really got a handle on things after this workshop. We'll also be signposting you to other ways in which you can get support, and we will always be on hand to answer your questions if you have any after the event as well. So the plan for today, I'll just briefly introduce our speakers. We're going to start off with an overview of the key principles about planning a new scholarship from myself. My name is Siobhan. I'm Access to University Coordinator at STAR, Student Action for Refugees. And I will tell you a bit more about STAR in a second. We also have Mariam Taher from the Universities of Sanctuary here. Mariam, if you want to give a wave, she'll be contributing to that overview as well. And then we'll be hearing from two universities who are sharing their insights about setting up a Sanctuary Scholarship. And we have Harriet Sheridan from the University of St Andrews. And Harriet works as a partnership officer in the University of St Andrews Global Office. She's been a member of the university's Sanctuary Operations Group since 2019 and provides central support for the current Sanctuary Scholar cohort. We also have Rafaela Armbruster from UCL. She is coordinator of admissions for UCL's International Foundation course at pre-undergraduate level. And she's also planned the Bowman Scholarship, which you'll be hearing about today. Since 2016, she's been involved in the Refuge in a Moving World Education Subcommittee and in a number of projects at UCL, including Pathways to Education for Women, Refugees and Migrants, and the LCN Science and English Summer School. And she also works as a mentor for Refugee Education UK. So it's fantastic to have their experience here today. After those presentations, we'll have Q&A. And we've also got a number of other experts in the room today who will be able to chip in there. So I particularly want to welcome Aruba, who is a STAR Equal Access activist.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us, Aruba. And we have Martha and Shahana from the Scottish Refugee Council here as well today, and Leslie Top from the University, from Birkbeck University of London. So there will be kind of many more people here who will be able to chip in and answer questions then. And then we'll finish off the session with some action planning about your next steps after this workshop. Okay, just a brief introduction to the two organisations you're hearing from today. As I mentioned, I work for STAR, Student Action for Refugees, and I'm part of the national staff team, but actually STAR is a national network of students who are building a more understanding and just society where refugees are welcomed and can thrive in the UK. And we do that through volunteering, fundraising, raising awareness, and also campaigning on a number of issues related to refugee issues. And one of our biggest campaigns is the Equal Access campaign. This is a national campaign that STAR has coordinated since 2008 to ensure that people seeking refugee protection in the UK can access higher education. And we do that as part of an increasingly wide coalition of STAR groups, university staff, partner organisations, and activists with lived experience across the country. As part of my role as well, I also support universities to set up and maintain scholarships for refugee and asylum seeking students, as well as any other activities that universities might be engaged in to improve access. So it's kind of those lessons from that experience of supporting scholarships, as well as our work with lived experience activists, many of whom have received scholarships, that we're drawing a lot of the principles from today. And then I'll hand to Mariam to talk about Universities of Sanctuary.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So just to give you a little bit of a background, Universities of Sanctuary is one of the streams under the national charity City of Sanctuary. So City of Sanctuary is a national organization like STAR, and also a movement of providing welcome, understanding and inclusion for people seeking sanctuary in the UK. And it's done through different ways. One of them is through local City of Sanctuary groups across the UK. Who work on a grassroots level directly with people seeking sanctuary. And it's also through the streams. So it's through embedding this culture or this movement in mainstream organizations like schools, universities, colleges, libraries, etc. So Universities of Sanctuary is one of those streams. And so it's an initiative to recognize and celebrate best practice and good practice around inclusivity and understanding the experiences and the barriers of people seeking sanctuary in accessing higher education. But it's also to help create a network for universities to share best practice, to learn and to provide and kind of share resources as well. So it's worth saying it's a result of an integration of the Article 26 project by the Helena Kennedy Foundation and all of the research and the resources provided by Article 26. And also it's one of the biggest parts of the University of Sanctuary is its collaboration with other partner organizations like STAR, mainly on the Equal Access to Education campaign, and also other organizations like Refugee Education UK and the Let Us Learn campaign by We Belong. So it's that network of the National University of Sanctuary stream, and also a network of universities who are either already Universities of Sanctuary, so have gone through an official accreditation process of gaining the University of Sanctuary award, or it's universities interested in the network or working towards creating a culture of welcome and improving that in their campuses and beyond. So similar to STAR, parts of becoming a University of Sanctuary is, or one of the parts or the steps is to create or develop sanctuary scholarships or opportunities to access higher education for students, and any pathways to help facilitate that access. But also it's working as much as possible with the local communities and community organizations. So sometimes that's through the smaller STAR groups at each university, and sometimes it's through many other ways of connecting with the local community and the groups representing the City of Sanctuary groups. So yeah, we'll kind of we will speak more about kind of some of the resources, but we just wanted to clarify as well that it's not, you don't have to be a University of Sanctuary to develop or create a sanctuary scholarship. It's just one of the steps. And to become a University of Sanctuary is to go through all the other steps that go beyond facilitating access or helping develop bursaries and scholarships.
Great, thank you, Mariam. And to continue on that same note of kind of explaining terminology, the term sanctuary scholarship, we use this term to refer to packages of financial support that are provided by universities to help people who face barriers to higher education because of their immigration status. But it's not a kind of catch-all term. There may be scholarships that have different names, such as Article 26, Equal Access, or humanitarian scholarships. We kind of chose this one as the most common term, but don't be alarmed if there is a different name for a scholarship at your institution. In fact, if I just take you to the STAR website briefly, we have a list here of all of the scholarships that we're aware of for students from forced migrant backgrounds. So this might be a helpful place if you're kind of wanting to find out what your university currently offers, or if you want to look at what other universities offer, then this is a place to start. And we're also particularly proud of our new website and the fact that you can now filter this table so you can kind of find the information that you want to see there. But yes, as Mariam said, it is connected to the Sanctuary movement, but you don't need to be a University of Sanctuary to set up a scholarship. And there are now over 70 universities that have scholarships of this type, which is fantastic because that means that there's a lot of great work being done already, and there's a lot of learning that we can do between institutions to share that good practice.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. And kind of looking at that extremely useful table of all the scholarships and the universities that offer scholarships, you might see some differences in the statuses. And we just wanted to give a very brief overview of statuses, as we want to kind of emphasize that it is complex and there might be statuses outside of this list, but these are the most common ones. So we're not going into too much detail about them, but further detail and advice is on the UKISA website. As I said, there may be more types of statuses that result from kind of legal claims to protection. So just to start, the first one is asylum seeker or people seeking asylum. We prefer to use a kind of a person-centered language to kind of, as much as possible, move away from saying asylum seeker and say people with asylum status, so that this legal status isn't labeling people, but looking at the context, we can see the best kind of choice of word for depending on when you want to use it. So people with asylum seeking backgrounds have requested a legal protection, and they're usually waiting for a decision from the Home Office on this claim. So this is often a lengthy process, and it can take many years. If an asylum claim is successful, a person can be granted a refugee status. So the Home Office decide that an individual has grounds for protection, and this is under the terms of the Refugee Convention. And a refugee status is 5 years leave to remain, after which they can apply for indefinite leave to remain. So after the 5 years, they apply for indefinite leave to remain, and that leads usually to applying for British citizenship later on. The next one would be humanitarian protection. This one is similar to refugee status in that it's also 5 years, and it's very similar in entitlements and rights to refugee status, with some maybe simple differences. But it's a form of protection that the Home Office gives to an individual who is at risk of persecution that isn't listed in the Refugee Convention. So it's for grounds different to the ones provided in the refugee status case. And the next one is discretionary leave or limited leave to remain. So this is kind of, the terms are interchangeable, but now most commonly it's known as limited leave to remain. And it's a temporary form of leave, and it can result from an asylum case if an individual is refused asylum, but granted leave on other grounds. So similarly, kind of outside the grounds of the Refugee Convention. So for example, they can be granted limited leave to remain based on the rights to a family life. And the duration of this status is 2.5 years. So unlike the previous ones, it's 2.5 years, and it can be renewed after the 2.5 years to extend the leave. There are, as you can see, other forms of leave as well. So kind of bear in mind, it's not kind of an exhaustive list, but guidance is on hand if you feel you come across a status you haven't heard of before, or you're not sure about the entitlements of the rights. Get in touch with an organization that can provide some legal expertise, or to seek legal advice, or you can get in touch with us directly and we can refer you to the correct person. So as you can see, there is section 67, there is palliative leave, and there is stateless. So these are other forms of leave, and all these three have access to student finance or home fees, just to note. And on the right-hand side, you can see terms that you might have come across. So these are more of kind of umbrella terms, again, kind of speaking about the context. If we are speaking about access to education or this group in general, these terms can be used to encompass different types of statuses, and they can be inclusive of the ones on the left-hand side in the list. So it can be used in any instances where you don't need to specify the status. So if you're not talking about kind of eligibility, etc., you can kind of refer to or see these terms as an umbrella term covering multiple statuses.
Thank you, Mary. I'm sorry, looking for the unmute button. Yeah, just to build on those statuses and kind of what they might represent. If you are here today, we're kind of assuming that you are already convinced of the need for scholarships and perhaps understanding a bit about the context. And perhaps you came to the Road to Travel event that we held with Birkbeck 2 weeks ago. If not, you can catch up online. But we just wanted to share the kind of overview of potential barriers that students might be facing. And I'm not going to go into these in detail, but there are, I mean, just seeing this on the screen gives you an insight into the breadth and depth of barriers that individuals might be facing, from financial to structural to contextual or personal issues that are affecting their educational journey. I suppose the kind of motivating message here is that scholarships can and do address a number of these barriers, and you might be surprised by how many they can address. But if you are setting up a scholarship, it's also really good to be aware of the barriers that scholarships can't address. And that might be going particularly into the kind of contextual and personal issues that an applicant might be facing. But it's really good to be aware of them and to provide support where possible. And we'll be giving you kind of tips about how that can be done. But now we're going to give you a kind of really broad overview of some key principles to think about. And before then you see kind of how these have been put into practice at UCL and St Andrews. Firstly, thinking about the eligibility criteria for a scholarship. Mariam already mentioned that this varies between different institutions, and to an extent your university can kind of tailor the eligibility based on the need that your scholarship is filling, or the particular student cohort that you're trying to reach. But some broad principles to consider: we would emphasize access to student finance as probably the major criteria to consider, because this is the major barrier that scholarships can address. I'm just going to jump forward to a kind of overview of eligibility here. I won't be going into this in detail, but there are 3 things that I wanted to flag here. Firstly, the complexity of eligibility for different elements of support related to higher education. This is complex for us as practitioners in the area, and it's complex for applicants as well. But it's really good to kind of be aware of that complexity and to have a named contact at your institution that can help to manage the situation. Secondly, you'll see that this is subject to change. So humanitarian protection has changed twice within the past couple of years. And those kind of adjustments to eligibility can cause further problems for applicants. But as Maria mentioned, organisations like ourselves are on hand to support with those kind of changes and any questions that you have. And thirdly, I wanted to highlight the particular barriers you'll see for people seeking asylum. Across the UK, people seeking asylum don't have access to student finance. As a general rule, they are classed as international students for fees purposes, although individual institutions do have the flexibility to change that policy internally. And they don't have permission to work. So funding higher education is often an impossibility for people seeking asylum. And that may be a group that your scholarship particularly targets as a result. But also you'll see here on the side that even if an individual's immigration status means that they are eligible for student finance, there may be other factors that disqualify them, such as having previous study at a similar level. So do kind of bear in mind that complexity, and there's a link here to the UKISA website. We'll be sharing these slides afterwards so that you can read about it in more detail. As a result of that, what we tend to recommend is broad criteria across a different range of statuses, but you may well have a hierarchy of needs within that in light of the different eligibility that individuals have. There's a link to a document here from Article 26 that gives some broad principles of guidance there that you might want to consider. But back to other things to consider, there are also other barriers prior to applying for a scholarship. So even on that eligibility table where you see green ticks, that doesn't mean that an individual has had an easy route to higher education. And by the time that they get to applying to the scholarship, they may already have faced difficulties in applying to your institution in the first place. So here you might want to consider the kind of academic barriers that an individual might have faced. And as a result, your university may look into providing access pathways, such as the foundation program you'll hear about at UCL, that help to prepare a student for further study. And in terms of previous academic experience, when you are looking into your eligibility criteria, bear in mind that it might be difficult for an individual to prove their prior qualifications. So flexibility is really recommended there. And also that there might have been a gap in their academic career, which can mean that further support is necessary. That links very nicely then to the second recommendation, which is flexibility. So we can't emphasize enough understanding an individual case and kind of trying to have a named contact that can respond to any particular questions or issues that come up throughout the application process. And flexibility can also apply to the admissions process. Universities also often have particular language tests, for example, that they use in the admissions process. But some of those, such as IELTS, can be expensive and can be an additional barrier to higher education. So if you work with your admissions team, you could perhaps set up a different type of test, like an internal test, or organisations that offer tests that are free for students who are seeking asylum or from a refugee background. So we've got two examples here from Password and Duolingo that are increasingly used by other institutions. Secondly, then, moving on to the content of your scholarship. Again, this can vary between different institutions, but broad principles of what you might want to consider. Firstly, thinking about the local situation of your institution and your student cohort. If you are in the widening participation team, or if you're working with them already, they will already have an understanding of the kind of outreach that your university does. Even if they haven't been working with forced migrant students, they'll know the kind of needs in the local area and they'll have connections with schools and colleges. So you can build on that expertise and find out a bit more about if, for example, there is a large community of people seeking asylum in your local area that may be able to take up your scholarship. Secondly, funding for your programme. This will shape what your programme is able to offer. But we would definitely encourage you to dream big here. And we heard at the Road to Travel event that I mentioned, some really kind of inspiring tips from other institutions about working with alumni to raise funds, working with other partner organisations that are often willing to support funding a sanctuary scholarship. So do try and kind of work with your institution or with other partners to secure funding that will enable you to offer a really good quality scholarship. And that links to the point about the student experience. When we're planning a scholarship, we're not just thinking about getting the student in the door, we're thinking about helping them and supporting them to complete their studies and to have the full student experience like anybody else. And so if your scholarship is offering only a fee waiver, for example, then you might want to consider the other challenges that that student will face in funding their living costs. If possible, it's great to kind of research the living costs in your local area to find out what's needed to support that student, and to think about the equivalent kind of student loan amount that other students will be receiving. And providing support in kind is also a possibility. So this is particularly important to consider if you are opening your scholarship to students who might be receiving asylum support, which is support either in the form of money or accommodation from the Home Office while people are seeking asylum. Any form of cash bursary for a student will affect that asylum support. And I won't go into it in detail here, but that we have a guidance document that you can read, which goes into much more detail about that. But essentially, there are solutions to this. It's not something to put you off offering a scholarship. And providing support in kind is one of those solutions. And that means rather than offering money, you might be offering things like a travel pass or book vouchers, things that will support that student's study, but won't affect their asylum support. And over to you, Mariam.
Thank you. So with kind of the development of the scholarship, the eligibility criteria and the content, as Siobhan was saying, it's so important to recognize the local context and what the needs are, and maybe seeing if there is any opportunity or maybe already existing connections between your university and local schools and colleges. It's recognizing at which level these barriers or challenges can arise, or students can be aware of them. Students seeking protection in the UK can find out that they can't access education, and they then find themselves in a position where there isn't maybe enough information or guidance on what to do next. So the best thing for universities to do here is to take the opportunity to offer the same, I guess, or similar widening participation and outreach activities that are provided for other students, specifically for this group of students, recognizing the extra and additional barriers that are in place. So it's things like offering taster days or online or phone chats. So kind of the opportunity for the students to ask questions either about the scholarship or just entry criteria, the requirements for courses, recognition of their qualifications, for example, if they didn't study their secondary education or further education in the UK. This can be invaluable because once you have a really great scholarship program, it's so important, as you know, to be able to meet the requirements to access that scholarship program, especially if you've just come from a different country with different qualifications. Those connections between schools and colleges are important. Between most of the time, it's the widening participation or widening access office and the local schools and colleges to make sure that colleges or the schools in your area are aware that the scholarship exists, who is eligible for them, and if they identify or know anyone who might be eligible to them, they might be able to refer them directly to the university and give them some information about this, or be able to guide and answer their questions if they are confused about their options at point of applying to universities. So kind of usually the second year of college, or if someone just visits a college or a school to ask about this. So there is kind of the recommendation to make use of STAR and the University Sanctuary Network for this, absolutely to kind of, as you saw, there is that central website or webpage on the STAR website of all the scholarships in the UK. It's usually my go-to place and option to kind of send to students to say, these are all the universities that have scholarships. So once you have one or have developed or added one, just to kind of let Siobhan know or myself, and we can share that as well as on the Universities of Sanctuary website. And if we do get any inquiries directly, we can always refer the students to your university and make them aware about what opportunities there are. But also there's a really great opportunity there to help the students at university. So if you have a STAR group or a Student Action for Refugees group at your university, to help them organize with maybe alongside the widening participation office, help them organize a taster session of different lectures or an open day. There has been fantastic examples of open days before, co-organized by students and the university, either in person or online. So there has been really excellent virtual open days and events, specifically for students with sanctuary seeking backgrounds. And they can be really invaluable to kind of just give students the opportunity to see there are scholarships, but these are all the ways you can access them. There is a pastoral or support team at the university. These are all the services, these are your options, and it just gives them a really great awareness of the education system here if they aren't familiar with it yet, and also all the support that they can access. At the end there is a really useful resource, and it's by Article 26. It's reaching out to sanctuary scholars, and it gives an example of universities who have really used some of these ways to try and reach out to their students, including having a point of contact at the university, or examples of really great events that facilitate that awareness around what opportunities there are for students, either in collaboration with other universities or just in the local area. And there's kind of an action plan at the end that helps you visualize what kind of departments could work on this or collaborate together to make this possible. The next part of that is the application process. And it's often a really kind of a learning process for the university. There are really great pre-existing resources and examples of really well-established scholarships that you could learn from in terms of how to set out the questions in the application form. There is a template again for this, which a lot of universities do use now. And it's about what kind of questions you could be asking, what kind of criteria or areas you want to find out about from the student to be able to help them in the best way possible. And it's really important to emphasize the points around making this process as comfortable and as supportive as possible for the student. As you can probably imagine from all the barriers and all of the things we discussed today, it's a very daunting process to apply to university when you have kind of a sanctuary background or asylum or refugee background. To get there and to apply is a big, really big step, and there's that uncertainty about whether you would be offered a place and whether you have all of the information needed to be able to access university. So to just be as supportive as possible, to not ask for any, not ask any questions which might make the student have to retell their stories or revisit any trauma from the past, and to make the application as accessible as possible, make it downloadable and have different ways of sending it to the university rather than just having an online way of sending it, to have a couple of ways to make it accessible. Consider deadline issues and just kind of really consider that those students would have to apply for the university to get a place, to confirm their place as insurance or firm, and then apply for the scholarship. And they might need to contact UCAS or have to take some steps to be able to make sure that the university that gives them the scholarship is their first or firm choice, and to be able to secure a place. It's really important to consider that and make sure there is enough time for the student to prepare their application for the scholarship. To make the interviews as informal and as light as possible. Again, it can be very traumatizing to go through an interview and questions for students in this group, and to really seek feedback from the students as much as possible, either when they're successful or not, but also the other more important side of that as well is if they are unsuccessful, to provide feedback to the student and provide as much support as possible. So reasons why they weren't successful in the scholarship, if there are any things related to their requirements, so English level requirements or qualifications, make sure you can refer them to an organization, a university, a college, just kind of give them a next step to be able to reapply or continue their way and not lose any hope or motivation in accessing higher education. And again, seeking feedback from the students as well about how they thought the process was and if there is anything that can be improved in that kind of process of learning from the university side. Again, kind of continuing on the supporting students, and I'll try to be quick because I'm speaking really quickly. I realize it's because I'm kind of aware of the time, but it's so important to recognize, again, what the barriers that students face before going into university, and then whilst they're at university, whilst they're successful at the scholarship, the barriers and the challenges don't end there. They might face lots of, or continue to face lots of other challenges that they need support with, and especially as Siobhan was saying, trying to have as a fulfilling experience, really as similar as other students at university. Really, as a university, helping them participate and have the best experience is really important. So there is guiding principles around this, which we will share in the resources, but just to give you a brief overview, to help really give the student the freedom to be anonymous on campus, the importance of choice and consent in sharing any information about themselves, if they are on, if they want or they're comfortable for people to know that they're on scholarship or not, and to have a named contact to support them, to have regular meetings, maybe every term or every couple of weeks, for example, depending on what is best for the student and what's more supportive for them. So that's kind of regular pastoral and academic check-ins, recognizing that there might be things that the academic supervisors or tutors might not be able to help them with, especially kind of immigration or legal topics, and things affecting practical day life things because of their status. So opening a bank account, accessing accommodation, accessing welfare support, etc. Access to orientation and academic support, making sure that they do feel supported academically. It can be really, really difficult to adjust to a new education system and to, of course, coming from a different academic background, or really just even if they've studied in the UK, university can be a really challenging or different environment academically. So to have that support is important, and then opportunity to meet with other scholars is really important. A lot of students would kind of love to connect and network with other students who have gone through the same experience as them, but again, giving them the freedom to choose this and see if they are comfortable to do so or not. Access to counseling, mental health support is really, and as you know, it's invaluable for all students, but especially students of this group. And just to be aware of what kind of support there is important, but also from the university side to make sure that people in the well-being and welfare teams are aware about the challenges and the circumstances those students have gone through, and can provide them with the support they need is important. And then kind of publicizing any hardship funds which students of this group might be eligible for, as well as other funds which might help them, like childcare support or support to meet English requirements for a course, are really important to kind of let the students know about, especially if these things aren't covered by their scholarships. As you can see, there's a lot of kind of things that you would probably provide to other students on campus, but it's really important to know that there are maybe challenges or circumstances that may be different, or the staff members might not have come across before, especially if the scholarship is new. And this really just it emphasizes the importance of training and the recognizing that awareness and training about the asylum process, rights, entitlements, the changes in immigration status and how to handle that or how to deal with it in the best way possible is really important to have once you've established sanctuary scholarships. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to also say there is going to be training specifically for academics, for staff or universities developing scholarships on maintaining and developing them. So the administration of those scholarships and best practice around that is going to be provided by the Scottish Refugee Council in collaboration with STAR and Universities of Sanctuary. And we can give you a little bit more information about that if you have any questions. So that will be specifically about, there is a general module around that. So rights and entitlements for refugees and asylum seekers, which you can sign up to, and it's already exists at the organization, but this one will be more specifically for universities and for developing scholarships, which will be coming soon. And there are also other organizations that do offer trainings for practitioners on how to be more aware about the challenges and the barriers for these students and how to best support them. And that is provided by an organization called Refugee Education UK. And there is another one provided by We Belong, which is a youth-led organization, and they also have training for practitioners working at universities. And finally, just to say, there are a host of really great resources. The first one is you can connect on Slack if you would like with other staff members who have scholarships at universities for sanctuary seeking students. And it's just a really great way to ask any questions or connect, share best practice. And you can get in touch with Siobhan if you'd like to be added to that workspace. There is a Universities of Sanctuary disc mail, and you can email me to add you to that, and you can subscribe to kind of, again, ask for advice. And it's just kind of a bigger network of anyone who's interested in this movement, and not just staff working on sanctuary scholarships. There are scholarships networking events organized by Siobhan, and they are an opportunity to meet with other staff who have either established or want to establish scholarships, again, to share best practice and to share advice and ask questions. And there might be a lot of existing initiatives at your institution and lots of people kind of working on this or interested in this, who you might be able to network with and really ask for opportunities to develop this together. As we said, there is training, and we can share more links and information about that. And there's also lots to read and lots to watch, again, around this topic, which all the links will be in these slides, and we'll be sending them out so you can have access to them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mariam. And here are our contact details as well. So do reach out to us to discuss anything else. With that, we'll hand over to Harriet Sheridan from the University of St Andrews. So if I stop sharing, Harriet, over to you.
Great. You should be able to see my screen. Okay, perfect. So thank you, Siobhan, for the introduction and for inviting me along to today's session. As you have a small amount of time, I'm really just going to touch on some of what we thought were the key points when setting up a Sanctuary scholarship. But I will say that I'm more than happy for anyone on today's call to reach out to me afterwards to discuss something in detail. Personally, I've learned so much best practice in this area by reaching out to colleagues in other institutions to get their perspective, including the next presenter today, Rafaela. So as part of our preparation to become a University of Sanctuary, a key component of this was establishing Sanctuary scholarships. You can see from our timeline, our colleagues moved quite quickly to get us in the position to welcome our first cohort of Sanctuary scholars in 2020. However, in order to get to this point, one of the most important things to consider is when to start having discussions with senior leadership at your institution. At St Andrews, once information was gathered about becoming a University of Sanctuary, colleagues leading on this initiative met with our Vice Principal for International Strategy and External Relations, as well as other senior colleagues. Gaining their support for this initiative ensured that it was endorsed by our academic council and a case was clearly made for allocating funding. Another key point was clarifying the fee status for students with an asylum background, as I think has already been mentioned. Previously, they would have been classified as international students and been charged international fees. However, at St Andrews, recognised that this was not really a suitable option and was able to reclassify asylum seeking students as home students for fee purposes. It's also useful to include a member of your development and alumni team in discussions about funding scholarships. We've had a development colleague in our Sanctuary operations group since the start, and we recognised in order to sustain and grow these scholarships, external donor funding will likely be required. As you can see on this slide, these are our current Sanctuary awards that we advertise and the applicants eligible to apply. Our hope, of course, is that these scholarships continue to grow so that we can support more students. Once your scholarships are up and running, good signposting is really important for applicants. Having a web page that clearly lays out the eligibility criteria, what the scholarship covers and how to apply is so important. As is getting the word out about your scholarship, particularly if they've just launched. Utilising networks like STAR and Universities of Sanctuary, as well as notifying other universities in your region can really help with engagement and identifying suitable candidates. It's also worth considering outreach opportunities. We collaborated with the Syrian Futures Programme in early 2020, pre-pandemic, to arrange a visit to St Andrews for Syrian young people based in Edinburgh. And offered them the opportunity to try some course taster sessions and experience university life for a day. We did learn a lot after the first round of advertising the scholarships. In particular, it's important to be clear about how you're going to assess these candidates. We spoke with other institutions about the criteria they used, and we adapted it to fit our expectations. We also created a subgroup of our Sanctuary operations group to assess applications and advise on some of the more complex cases. And again, as been mentioned, flexibility is really key here. We also adjusted the deadline to ensure that applicants were notified of the outcome of their application as soon as possible. We realized that not all scholarships would necessarily be awarded each year for various different reasons. So we did also discuss using unused, unawarded scholarships to support other sanctuary-related initiatives, including working with the Council for At-Risk Academics to welcome PhD students to St. Andrews. And finally, it's also important to consider how you'll support the cohort throughout their university journey. At St. Andrews, the Global Office acts as a central point of contact, which I realise is not really the norm at most universities, but we found it actually works quite well. We work very closely with our colleagues in student services and widening participation to ensure we signpost correctly. But we also were able to include Sanctuary Scholars in social events and information sessions that we organise for other international cohorts, which hopefully means that they feel part of the broader student community where they don't necessarily need to be identified as a Sanctuary Scholar. So I appreciate that was a whistle-stop tour of what we're doing, but I'm going to stop there and happy to answer any questions later on.
Thanks so much, Harriet. I think, yeah, we can learn from your concise presentation skills. And that's a great example of developing a scholarship as well, just showing setting it up is one thing, but then re-evaluating it is another. Raffaello, over to you to hear a bit about UCL.
Everyone, so my name is Raffaella Armbruster, and I'm the coordinator of admissions on the UPC, and I organize the UPC Bowman Scholarship. So this is a slightly different sort of scholarship than the ones you've been hearing about, because it's a scholarship for pre-UG access. So for 1 year of access, for a pre-undergraduate year, that we launched here in UCL in March 2021, so just this year. It's called the Bowman Scholarship, and you can see here a sort of the extract from the website that shows a little bit what it is, what it looks like. It's 2 scholarships a year, and it's a tuition fee waiver for students to access the UPC undergraduate preparatory certificates. So why did we sort of create this pathway or open the UPC course to students from forced migration background? The 2 main rationales. I tried to keep this kind of jolly. I'm not sure if I succeeded with these drawings. Essentially, the first reason was that we had this access to HE course in place, so the UPC International Foundation at UCL. Other universities have courses like this as well. Typically, they are for international students, overseas students. We'll talk about these qualifications perhaps in a second. So we had this course, and this course had a few elements there. It's of course part of UCL, and it's an international course. So we're trying to say here that we're a global university, and we are. It's London-based. It works with how UCL, the university, presents itself. There is an admissions protocol designed to assess students whose qualifications don't allow them direct entry. And we have a rigorous application process through subject entrance test. And there's a lot of support, and support was something that was mentioned a lot earlier before. And of course, we're successful as those students successfully progress to undergraduate studies. And you can see this little pie chart saying, so they stay at UCL, they go to other Russell Group universities, etc. So that was, essentially, we realized we have a course that knows how to prepare students, and crucially speaking, for forced migrants, can give them a qualification that is like A-levels or like an IB, a qualification that is recognized by all UK universities. So they will have this time to start their UCAS application, prepare, and have the right subjects, and of course finish the year with a qualification so that they meet their offers. And the second rationale, I'd say, is that we identified a pathway gap at UCL. I put maybe in the sector, because I do think there is one in the sector. Here you have a sort of an idea of what's going on at UCL. So you start at the top with schools. So of course, widening participation has outreach programs for school for the school level, and then we had undergraduate. Sorry, it's very good. We have an access opportunity sanctuary scholarship. So this is and other scholarships. Of course, refugee students can access student loans. So there is some offer, some ways to get in. But of course, all these sanctuary scholarships require that the students receive an offer already. So necessarily have the qualification. There's pre-postgrad courses and at UCL, and of course there's post-grad support, sanctuary scholarship for PG, and of course CARA, the Council for At-Risk Academics. So we felt the bit in red was what was of course missing, the pre-undergrad access course for these students. Quickly, what we also did was we were thinking about these names and how we call students and what are international students, what is an international student at UCL, what is an international student for the higher education sector. And so I'm not going to read all of this, but essentially we thought that opening international foundations to students from forced migration made a lot of sense. It was like recruiting foreign nationals who have clear academic expectations, who are talented, who are ambitious individuals, and who, like many international students, are not eligible for direct entry due to a number of reasons. Their studies are not recognized, have been interrupted, other things happen to them in their lives, etc., etc. And for them, doing a high school pathway is not recommended. It can be because of their age, because of their interests, and other reasons. And so selecting these candidates for us sort of fit the agenda of international recruitment in that, in addition to the obstacles faced by international students worldwide to come to this country to study, the forced migrant students are also, well, unlikely to be able to study to their full potential because of higher education institutions not recognizing their needs nor their abilities. And they recognize needs and abilities for UK and overseas students. So this is a sort of maybe the principle, or one of the things that we were considering whilst we were trying to open the UPC to forced migrants. So how did we do it? So as I said, I mean, mapping the institution's offer, what's there at your in your institution is of course really a good start. As Harriet said, I mean, there's many things you can do. And it's great to work with faculties and writing participation and everybody that is there. Having strong staff support is really important to show that at whatever admin or academic staff levels you are, that staff are supportive, and usually they are very supportive to I think these ideas. For us, what we did on the UPC is that we ran pilot schemes first in 2018, 2020, and that's because it was a complex case here with a student who had to defer for personal reasons, and then last year. And they were very successful, these pilot schemes, and it was one student each year. And of course, this allowed us to decide on the approach or approaches we would have, and we talked about the broad criteria. So the Women's Scholarship is refugees and asylum seekers, for instance. And it's tuition fee only. And initially we thought we were going to do something like accommodation, and then really we're still developing, in fact, what exactly we want to offer. And it's not as clear cut as it may seem. And finally, so how does it work? But I think here it's very similar to what Harriet said. So recruitment and admissions are really key here. We have an application criteria and a selection criteria, and we do select students very carefully on this program. But I think you can select and be very selective with students from forced migration background. I think it's important. It's part of managing expectations as well and preparation to higher education study. Assessing or not prior qualifications, English level, all of this is possible, I think, because we are in institutions that know how to do test development, entrance testing, English level testing in-house. So we really use this. We were also aware of cultural awareness. I think some students don't necessarily know how to do all of this. So all of this requires a bit of preparation. We also are working a lot with the students and in the design of it to consider what sort of UG progression is possible for these students. So we have a UCAS advisor on the course. We signpost sanctuary scholarships for those who will be eligible. So for instance, students who are seeking asylum, we ask them to apply to specifically these scholarships. and these universities. So we help them in their UCAS sort of applications. So there's a lot of sort of discussions about that. Of course, pastoral care, support and training for all, I would say pastoral care for the students, the applicants, the candidates at different stages. So this was really the first year we ran it officially, the admissions process. And there was a lot of, a lot of work to do. We had a lot of applications and a lot of follow-up and signposting to do. And of course, support and training for staff is important too. But that was, I think that was mentioned several times. And finally, finding partners in-house or outside the institution, something we're also continuing to work on here with fundraising, with and other sort of partner institutions that could help us develop the scheme. Sorry, I hope I kept in appropriate time.
Thank you so much.
I was trying to be very, very quick.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. Yeah, thank you. That's such a good example of kind of researching what's happening at your institution and filling a gap that you see to support that progression. So that's excellent.